Okay. All right. So the point that Eric was trying to make was that subdivisions do have a required site visit by the planning board. And I'm suggesting to put that into Article 12 rather than Article 3 so that we know that it's part of the pre-application process.
You're saying that that requirement is in there now?
Under Article 3, it's saying that the planning board may conduct a site visit, because the way it's done now is that I do the site visit, I give my opinion of it at the meeting, but if the planning board does want to have a site visit, then they can require it for any site plan, really. But for Eric's, I mean, Eric, is your focus more on the subdivision process?
Well, I mean, there might be other instances where I think that a planning board visit would be required, but the one that I'm particularly concerned about is subdivisions. In any subdivision of any, I mean, okay, if we're gonna define subdivision, anything over two, so that's any subdivision therefore, requires a site visit by the board. I mean, that's not to say that not necessarily the entire board has to show up, but as many of the board members of the board can show up to look at it and determine whether, you know, how they feel about it from actually visiting the site and seeing, actually looking at the plans for the subdivision. You know, I think that it's important to lay our eyes on it. I mean, I think that's our job. Because we really don't understand some of the issues around, if you will, you know, the rural character or the aesthetics or the site, or the view shed. You know, they can't be determined until you go out to the site and look at it.
Okay.
I think the way it's written allows us to do that. It could be under advisement from Max and the CEO, particular need. I don't see to have a rule in there where it has to review this, you know, do a site visit, and then only Max and one planning board, you know. And it could be winter, there could be a snowstorm. I mean, there's many reasons, and there's a major storm, and we postpone somebody's plans, you know. Do we really want to do that? I like the way it's written now. I don't have any problem with it.
What's
I-
yeah.
I was going to say, I don't mind just including that in the pre-application portion of the subdivision article, because I think that would address your concerns. And then when we get to the pre-application phase of a planning board or of a subdivision, which is the first thing that has to happen, the planning board can determine in that first meeting when to set, if they want to set a site visit, if that's what you're asking for.
Okay.
That way it only happens to subdivisions, and the board still has some leniency on whether to conduct a site visit for just a regular site plan.
That's
I mean, that seems reasonable to me.
that's a good argument.
I'm gonna have to make notes. Yeah.
Is there anything else on Article 3?
No.
Nope, just a one word change, which doesn't have too much of an impact.
Yep. The downtown business district agricultural in 6.75. What spurred that?
That is a change. Originally, it was not allowed, but because the Maine state constitution was amended to allow the right to food, that is just so the town's not trying to have a conflict with the state amendment.
Interesting. Okay.
That's honestly the only reason. There's someone who's advocating for the town to pass the Maine food sovereignty ordinance as well this June, so I'm just covering the books.
Okay.
So Max, as far, so now that we're on this, the copy of the ordinance you refreshed for me, Reese, doesn't have it, and your new definitions doesn't have agriculture small definitions. in it.
Doesn't have agriculture related businesses?
It doesn't have small, what small and large means.
Well, that's because that's under. Yeah, that's because that's under the specific uses or specific standards. And we lost Barbara. Well, we can go through this, and if she gets back, then we can go through that question. So the other changes to Article 6.
There she is.
Oh, she's back. Barbara, sometimes taking away the
Yes, sorry.
no worries. Sometimes if
Would you tell me where that read was again?
first of all, Barbara,
Where
sometimes
those definitions are?
first, Barbara,
Mhm.
if you turn off your camera, you might be able to have much more clear talking points. Yeah. The small and large agriculture related businesses are split when we get into the specific standards. Kind of like how light industrial has their terms for what separates them from regular industrial.
Yeah, we've gone into garbled land again. Let me see if I can get you guys on the phone.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry. You can keep going. We can get back to this if
Okay.
hmm.
Well, the other changes for Article 6, I did have short-term rental just as a separate item under the residential uses, just so that it's defined in the ordinance, just so we have a definition, because with LD 2003, it does state that the towns are asked, or the towns can do something on short-term rentals, and I simply just want to have a distinguishing item, not really in the regular land use areas, but at least in the shoreland zones, to have it not in the resource protection and stream protection zones.
I still don't quite understand that. I mean, I don't understand the distinction and why it has anything, because you did try to explain to me, but I'm a little dense when it comes to, I didn't understand how you're really looking at it from a shoreland protection issue, right? A rental is a rental.
Mhm.
Now, I don't understand why we're singling out short-term rentals. And, even I went on the website for the town for the building application.
Mhm.
And it does itemize that short-term rentals require a building application. And they need to be, and it says it needed to be permitted and then inspected. How would that be any different than any other house? Why is a short-term rental permitted and inspected differently than any house or rental for that matter?
Mark, did you want to talk about the inspection part of it?
Sure. The differentiation is that you have a change of use. Instead of it being a primary residence and falling under that category, you are now running a business for profit by renting out a portion of your house. The state is looking into making some global changes as well, because they recognize that there's some issues with noise complaints, with parties, with all kinds of stuff. So they're looking at, there should be some type of short-term rental registry so that there are contact information so that if there's an issue, then that can go forward. The other issue is that looking at it from a safety standpoint, you have NFPA regulations that require that each sleeping area, have two means of egress, and it has to have smoke detectors as well. And again, when you get into a business, you're starting to, you're starting to cross over that line from a residential house, which needs to meet those standards anyway, to something where you're potentially renting. Is somebody just, plopping off an area in somebody's basement so that somebody can rent to that individual? We don't know. So the idea behind it is that any, I believe Max probably has already explained it, but the initial, anything moving forward from the date of the acceptance would require that they have an inspection to make sure that they meet NFPA 101 safety codes. And
Does
that's
that-
it. Once they
does that
do
apply-
that, they run through, then they're done. They're registered. We have contact information, and we know that, whoever the renter is going to be safe as well. So that's the idea behind it.
Does that apply to to long-term rentals as well, or just short-term rentals?
Long-term rentals, when somebody, let's say for instance, if somebody, I just had one the other day where a gentleman is renting a house, but now he wants to split the basement and the first floor and make 2 apartments out of it. Well, the minute he does that, he has to have a change of use. And then there's inspections that go along with that. And then it starts falling into, other categories as far as what the requirements are. And again, when we go in and we do a certificate of occupancy for new residents, we do, all the life safety inspections as well. So,
Well,
everything that we do that's new gets a certificate of occupancy, which includes the NFPA 101.
Couldn't we just make it then that any short-term rental that is multifamily, that is to say, or boarding, because it sounds more like you're really referring to boarding houses essentially, somebody who takes their house and divides up the room. Now they could do that, let's say on Airbnb or whatever, they could do it and then they could let out all the rooms, they could shut out the basement. But if if you're doing a short-term rental or long-term rental where you're renting it to a single family, to a single occupant, a single renter.
Basically fall into, because of state definitions, you fall into 2 categories: long-term and short-term. And it's usually based off from 28 days because of February. Ow! Oh.
You all
Sorry.
right, Mark?
Yeah, what happened?
I get muscle spasms from my injury that have been killing me the last few days. So sorry about that. But yeah, so there's a definition and there's a dividing line between what is considered short-term and what is considered long-term, and that's 28 days. So if you're renting under 28 days, that is a short-term rental. If you're renting anything, greater than 28 days or monthly, yearly, whatever, then it is a long-term rental.
Right, but under the current code, you're not required to either permit or inspect long-term rentals, only short-term rentals. And you're saying that's based on a state code?
No, you would need if you chose to do, do a long-term rental, then there should be a change of use application that's put forward, because now you're in a different category. It's no longer a residential occupancy. It is now either an apartment or it falls into a different category.
Well,
So we track that by change of use.
Yeah, what category would that be? I mean, I understand an apartment, that's one thing, but if it's a house, is that a different category?
So
Again, it depends on if it's 28 days or more. Max?
No, but if it's a house and it's more than 28 days, does it fall into a different category in accordance with our code?
it would be
Rental property.
it would be, well, for now, For now, it would just be a dwelling unit. It would
Right.
be the single family dwelling unit or family dwelling or multifamily, because as defined, that's talking about actually providing a space for a family to actually live and occupy and have as habitation.
Whether they own it or rent it doesn't make a difference.
Well, that, yeah,
Right, it's
that'll
still-
get to similar uses.
The codes are the same regardless if it is a family that is renting that or if it is a family owned and occupied building. The codes are the same as far as egress and the certificate of occupancy is the same.
So I just worry, my concern is only that by having to permit and inspect short-term rentals, we're actually gonna, not you, Mark, but we're actually discriminating against short-term rentals as opposed to long-term rentals, because they don't require the same, they just require, a long-term rental requires the same kind of inspection as any other house, whether it's rented or owned by the owner. I mean, whether
Right.
it's lived in or rented by the owner, gets the same treatment. But short-term rentals get a different treatment. And that's where I'm a little bit worried about
Yeah,
that.
hold on, Mark.
Is that true?
Yeah, Mark, can you? I didn't think there was a new inspection or any difference in the inspection. I always thought that the short term just follows the same standards in the book. Can you?
No, the only thing that we were looking at for a short-term rental, and this started with Stan years ago. He was the one that started the voluntary short-term
Right.
rental registry. And then what that was is there was actually something put forward about doing inspections for life safety code only. So the only thing that we would be looking for is just making sure that they're not putting meme in a basement with no windows and no way to get out if there's a fire and stuff like that. That's what we would be looking for. And to
Which
get back to your question, Eric, when you're talking about the differences between long term and short term, the long term we do that because when the place was originally built, there was a certificate of occupancy inspection that went through, which covers the egress windows and all the NFPA 101 standards. So technically, yeah, they're getting the same one. We're just taking what was a change of occupancy as far as the short-term rentals and saying, okay, anything moving forward, would require that they just submit to a 101, life safety inspection.
which is
So, and
what,
that's basically
and the
Yep.
101 safety inspection is, I believe, under Article 7, and is something that's already required as part of the construction. Yeah, under the construction standard 7.2, you're talking about the NFPA 101 life safety code, correct?
but that's it's part of the standard for meeting constructions and stuff like that. But what we don't know is what are they renting? So
Right.
if somebody opens up an Airbnb right now, then there are no checks and balances in place to say that this is a bedroom. They don't necessarily have to do anything as far as that. They can find a broom closet and put Harry Potter under the stairs, and guess what? You've got an Airbnb. They're not going to make a whole heck of a lot of money, but um, the idea is to protect the renter, to make sure that they get signed off on that. It buys them some protection because they now have something that says, hey, guess what, we've met the inspection and we're good to go. So if somebody complains, there's nothing there. And the other thing is that it just from that standpoint, the inspection process just looks at the safety aspect for anybody coming into town. So it protects both parties as far as that goes.
Well, I don't want to, but I don't want to get make too much of a point here, but again, if a Airbnb or any house is used as a multi-family or almost, if you will, a boarding house situation, then that's a slightly different thing than just doing a short-term rental to a single family or single renter. So I would agree, in those cases, we should actually have, if someone's gonna take a room in their house or 2 rooms in their house and open them up for rentals, so you can have 3, technically 2 unrelated people moving in, and they could be putting them into a basement or putting them into some, I mean, if they had full use of the house, then they have full access to all the exits, and there's nothing locked off or cordoned off or in some way they can't, because they have the whole house to work in. So there's that. But I would make the distinction personally between a boarding house situation, a short-term boarding house situation, and a short-term single family application. And the other thing is,
I'll give you-
I still don't
sorry.
see, I don't see in the code, and Max, maybe you could point out where there's a change of use for long-term rentals. Is there a change of use? If you're a homeowner and you want to start renting your house, you have to go get a change of use to do that?
Right now, just based on the language, if it's a long-term rental, it just falls under the single 2-family dwelling. Although again, I don't know what
It's not a
Mark,
change of use though, right? I mean, you're not applying for a change of use.
if you're going to be splitting up the home, then yes.
No, but if you're just gonna rent out your house to single family on a long-term rental, it's not a change of use. You just get to go ahead and just
Mm.
rent it out. You don't have to contact anybody, you have to permit it, you don't do anything, you just rent it out, right? No change of use.
It's as long as there hasn't been any construction, Eric, you are correct.
Right.
Because it has already been permitted and inspected under those standards. So the bedroom has already been
Yeah.
inspected for that purpose. The
And
thing that you gotta watch out for, and
Fine.
I'll give you a classic example. I had an inspection that I did. A person wanted to open up 2 bedrooms for short-term rentals, and the window sizes weren't even close to being egress windows. So there was a major issue with that that whole thing, that if somebody needed to get out of a secondary way, they couldn't. So that's the type of stuff that we're looking for, is just to make sure we're not looking to hammer on anybody. We're not looking to make money off from this. It's a minimal cost, just so we can give peace of mind to people that this meets the life safety standards. That's it.
Okay.
So
Okay. So Barbara, you've been waving your hand for quite some time.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Could I switch screens here? So Mark, to summarize, you're right. If you've got a house, it's occupied, it's lived in, and then you turn it into a full-time rental, rent it to somebody else, you move out, you rent out your place, it has already been inspected for all those safety issues. So if people start doing rooms in their house or part of their house, rent part of their house, that you're absolutely right, that there are a lot of places that I personally know of that do not have proper fire egress as in their rentals. And it's a problem. So here's my question. Do you see just having, once the address is inputted into your system, that it's been walked through and approved, then you don't have to, and be messed with it anymore after that point in time? Is it a question of the owner name submitting for the inspection, or do you have it on record as the property? So someone could buy the property and still continue to use it in that fashion, for instance, without having to go through another inspection. I'm just wondering how you're going to keep track of this stuff.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, what we would do is we would add notations into the computer, and then there would be some way of just putting forward that it has been inspected, and it meets the NFPA codes, and then that's it. There's no secondary inspection, there's no permitting every year, there's no follow-up. It's a one-time shot. So, and if somebody decided, oh, okay, I'm gonna rent 2 bedrooms, they could call back and say, hey, we're gonna change this. We want to go to 2 bedrooms. No problem. We'll go back and set the other one. Okay, you're good to go. So, but yeah, it's not meant to be an intrusive. We're going back every year to follow up and track, and it's just the one-time thing for the change. That's
Okay,
it.
and one more question. Does it affect the real estate taxes?
I don't.
Don't believe so, but that would be more of a Daryl question, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see
I've
how
had-
that really impacts it, since it's just the permitting process, like what's done for other uses in the town.
On the application process, when you go to apply, does it ask you whether the house is being rented out in its entirety or by room? Or in smaller sections?
I'll be honest with you, I have not really used the voluntary form that Stan filled out that is out there. And Max might be able to answer that better, but
I think that was just asking how many rooms are being rented out. I think
Okay.
that's all that was asked.
Because I'd say, I'll end the conference, I don't need to belabor this, but I mean, I concur with you. If it's a boarding house situation where people are renting out rooms, I think they should be inspected for the reasons you gave. Make sure that people have proper egress, fire safety, whatever the case may be. I disagree where people are renting out their entire house. And I think in the application process, they should state that. Whether they're renting out their entire house, short-term, whether they're renting out rooms. I think it makes a difference, personally.
So this is also where I get into the terms, because boarding house is already defined in the ordinance and it's already in the matrix chart, and that would be something that goes to the planning board. And that's something I don't know if people want to be here dealing with a 3-unit Airbnb in one house.
Well, but I'm not saying that it's I'm not trying to change.
Right,
the
no.
definition. I'm just saying, in essence, it is a boarding house. So when someone's renting out rooms, whether they be for 1 week or 1 month or 1 year, it becomes, you have this issue around safety because because the way that the thing is constructed, I mean, they're gonna cordon off certain parts of the house, and they're not gonna allow, the free flow that you'd normally have in a single family residence. Anyway.
Yeah, one of the things that Max and I talked about was basically because of the date that if this got accepted and voted on by the citizens and it passed and it went through, then it would be any new Airbnbs that are moving for short-term rentals. And then what Max and I were talking about is basically offering up free of charge. We'll come out and do a voluntary inspection for anybody. But there's nothing mandatory about it. It would just be the ones moving forward. But if somebody wanted to, say, hey, and I'll give you a classic example. Selectman Mike Thayer has a house that he is renting, and he wanted me to come down and do an inspection on it, life safety inspection, to make sure everything was going to meet that. So that's kind of what we're looking at. If somebody wanted to volunteer and just say, hey, can you come take a look? Is everything okay? Sure, we'll come down. No, but
So
that's kind of what we were. Go ahead, Max.
no, I was just gonna say, if you're done with that example, I just want to note that we're 1 hour in, and I think we've only really covered 2 topics of this whole thing. So I would like to hopefully get to wrapping up this item, or if we feel there's still a lot more discussion that's needed on this, maybe put a pin in it and we'll try and decide at the end after we've looked through this a little bit more. Because I would like to try and get through.
One more question, Max. The 30-day thing, less than 30 days.
Yep.
That's to one renter, but you could do multiple 28-day rentals.
Yes. The whole point of saying renting to one person less than 30 days is, I think, language based on what I've seen in some other communities, because someone who's renting out an Airbnb might do it for a weekend, they might do it for a week. Anyone who's there for more than a month at that point, I mean, that is some people's rent lease.
Okay.
The only thing that I would suggest, just off the cuff, is change the 30 days to 28 days. Anything less than 28. the reason I say that is because then you're not having the month-to-month renters falling into what's considered a short-term, B and B for the month of February. So it eliminates that by doing 28 days instead of 30.
So I'll have that note, and unless people want to make either, okay, we can, are there any other thoughts on the short-term rental item before moving forward? Okay.
Yeah, I got one thing. As of right now, we do not have a permit for a short-term rental, correct? There's no Airbnb that has a permit from the town. This whole section is new, right?
Pretty much.
Okay. So we're creating a permit for these
Mhm.
that can be revoked. So the part of what this does is gives an enforcement mechanism to help prevent people renting out their house on the shore and creating a nuisance for their neighbors, right?
Mhm.
Isn't that part of what this is doing? And if we're going to talk about this, I think we should talk about that topic. But
Quickly, this is not meant to be a permitted issue. It is meant to be more of a short-term rental registry. So if they're registering and we do the inspection just to make sure that that's it. And we add contact information to the computer database. So if we do get complaints about a renter or something of that nature, we can get in touch with the owner or somebody in order to say, hey, look, they're throwing wild parties. We're getting all kinds of complaints. Can you call them, deal with it, blah, blah, blah.
Maybe we should change the language then, rather than saying permit, because it is on the website for the town. It says permit and inspection required. It should be it should be called registry. A registry is different than a permit.
I would say form.
I agree, Eric.
I mean, that's starting to get to the very specifics of a form that really follows after this would be on the books. But yeah, that's something Mark and I can change. All right. So moving on, I think the next item was on page 6-10 in your packets. It's the inclusion of a massage therapy use. This was something that Mark and I have been asked quite a bit on, just to have a review process for this as well. There are some state items that we do have in the standards that I'll go over a little bit later on. I have this down for CP just because that's the middle review process. It can be CEO, it could be planning boards. That's pretty much it.
I would be thrilled if this was not a planning board item.
Noted. Next,
No, wait, can we go up? I'm wondering why, up above, hotel or motel / overnight cabin, inn. And why is, village in the, historical village, we're not allowing any more inns?
that's hotel or motel has always been a thing not permitted in the historic village, I think ever since the ordinance was created. And that was because I think the town's thought was, well, bed and breakfast or like a smaller item like the Waldoboro Inn that was approved recently, that was just more of a bed and breakfast, a smaller size thing. Whereas the hotel motel, I think the fear
Right, but you
was
have the word in there, and I'm wondering, did you want to put that in?
that's been the title since 2005. And I think the concern with just that category was that a Best Western or something would be put in the downtown, like this big scale project. Brendan?
Yeah, those are state definitions.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a rather high number of beds that are applied to all of those definitions in that category that I think they all go together in this instance.
Well, we can't figure out another way of saying that up to 10 lodging rooms. That's because that's what we're talking about here. Oh, those are the motel. Okay, so that's the big
Yep.
commercial things. It must have a certain volume of rooms or something for all this, wouldn't it? To make it easier to understand?
Oh,
I think those numbers of rooms are all in the state statute. I'm not sure if they're in our definitions, but I think they are.
You're correct, it is. It is defined through the state.
Can you just find it and add that, Max, to, I think it
Yeah.
would just help.
Yeah, I can include that. I mean, inn does give a specific number, hotel didn't. But then motel doesn't give a specific number, but I can go through the state and give some exact numbers then.
So a Moody's cabin situation couldn't, well. A lot of places it couldn't go. I guess it would just get reviewed, okay?
Yep.
Okay,
There's a reason why in the findings of facts, I always say you can find this use as this under this definition page. Just so that people can go to it and see if the definition lines up. So with that said, then there is page 6-12. This would remove woodworking from the downtown. This is just based on some comments that I've received regarding the topic. That's pretty much it.
can we just backtrack a minute? So the bed and breakfast line, which is all planning board throughout all the districts, can't we just add, or boarding house is the same? Why don't we do bed and breakfast, boarding house, and inns less than whatever number of rooms that was in one slot? Because it's all the same. It'd come in front of the planning board.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That makes sense?
I can,
yeah, I mean,
Up to 10 rooms.
I may have to make sure the definition can match, because the definition
Right,
in inn can include such terms as guest house, lodging house, tourist house, but not bed and breakfast, hotel, or motel.
yeah, I didn't understand that. Why is that but not? I have that as a future note.
So combine boarding house, inn, and bed and breakfast.
Well, why does, in definition of inn, which back in the definitions part says it's owner occupied, up to 10 rooms. Inn includes such terms as guest house, lodging house, and tourist house, but not bed and breakfast, hotel, or motel. Seems like bed and breakfast should be part of that. And
I'll have to look at the state definitions if,
you know, a
If
bed
that's
and
the case,
breakfast has a
'cause-
different definition than an inn.
yeah, because I'm,
at a certain point, there's yeah, fire extinguishers needed and all that stuff.
yeah, those are standard items that I'm talking about the definitions. But I've made a note of that and I'll address that.
Okay,
So
moving on.
woodworking being removed from the downtown. Is there any objection to that?
Yeah. Because there can still be woodworking that doesn't require paint booths. Or
I
that kind of,
I wasn't saying anything about a paint booth.
Well, that's where the complaints are coming from.
I didn't say
Right.
anything about complaints. I only
you
said
can
comments.
be making Christmas ornaments out of, you know, whatever, pine cones and downtown. I know we're splitting hairs here, but
No, I think that's an excellent point. I think that if you're gonna you should define woodworking as woodworking and spray booths is something different because, I mean, the cow's already out of the barn here because there already is a woodworker down in the middle of town, right?
Mhm.
Who owns the building.
Yes, and the history there, if you don't know, is that we had a whole meeting with him about this, and we changed the matrix to allow it, and
Nope. Woodworking has always been
it
permitted
was, oh, you know, really? Okay,
ever since 2005.
so it was a change of use then, that's why they came there.
It was a
Right.
change of use.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, it was, you know, he's spraying paint down there and we knew at the meeting that it was gonna potentially be problematic. And sure enough, people are complaining about the vapors from the paint, you know, sort of to be expected. We talked about it in advance. We can always change this back, you know, if there's some business that wants to occupy one of those spaces down there.
I mean,
Right?
there's nothing you can do about this guy spraying downtown now because of this.
He
because
went through the permitting process, and
That's that's too bad, because that's a problem
we
for the neighbors. I mean,
I sent notices. It was in the paper.
nobody said anything.
Nobody said,
Well-
the only question I got was about the noise. That was it. And that was
Maybe
addressed.
they didn't understand that the woodworker was gonna be also spraying finish. You know,
No, we talked about it in the meeting.
you did talk about it at the meeting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's, you know, we're talking about putting up filters and we talked about how the filters don't stop VOCs from passing through as the fans are drawing air through the filters, you know, and people can smell it, you know. I've talked to a couple of people who have, you know, are aware that it's going on down there, and I don't know if anybody's complaining to the town or what, but they're complaining to each other if nothing else.
I mean, Mark,
So,
doesn't
We've
this,
only,
So
can it be doesn't the codes, the some kind of state code, intercede here?
he
Because
meets,
I feel for these people who are having to breathe that stuff.
right, he meets all the code standards, he meets DEP standards. We had, Tim Smith from DEP come out and did ran some tests and on particulates. And the test came back as 0. There were no particulates leaving the building. So he meets all the requirements as far as DEP and stuff like that. I've only received 2 complaints from from the area.
But
And
often.
I've done what's that?
2 complaints, but often. Right?
Well,
Yeah,
one's
yeah, well,
very often.
okay, it's
So.
starting to get a bit off track at this
Yeah.
point.
But can
Right.
I just say, rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, like, you know, zigzag, can't we just refine the woodworking definition?
I leave that up to the board. I don't think we've had that many people asking for woodworking in the downtown, except this one case.
But I do think it's worth putting in that woodworking only refers to woodworking and not finishing. Because then it would require some other, if you're saying that it doesn't require any kind of, doesn't require any oversight as to whether they do it anymore. It's no longer, it's being, it's being crossed out, right? It's no longer-
Being crossed out would mean that it's being removed from the downtown, as in if someone was to come in and say, I want to do exactly what that guy's doing in the downtown, and this is changed, so it's removed, that they wouldn't be permitted anymore.
Oh, period. No one can do it anymore.
No one can do it in the downtown. So I'm just suggesting remove it if, as Brendan said, if someone does want to come into the town office and say, I want to make wood products in the downtown, then we just shrug and say encourages zoning change.
So they couldn't come from the planning board and talk about, you know, their simple wood products that don't require paint booths and whatnot.
Not unless they're just selling it, but if they're going to make it on site, then that'd be removed. Brendan, what were you going to say?
It's not, I don't really have an objection to this. I mean, I'm usually, let people do what they want with their property sort of attitude, but like, it sort of doesn't make sense. The location is not it's not an industrial location, and it's, the downtown business district is pretty small. It runs basically from it's basically just the downtown strip, and I don't really have any objection to removing this use. I think that this use makes more sense in other places.
So you're saying just remove planning board for downtown on this, on the line of the matrix?
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay,
don't like, we when we approved it, we had a whole discussion about it. We knew it was gonna be a problem. And sure enough, it's a problem. So we did an experiment, we got some data, and it doesn't look like it's a great idea, I think.
Well, the downtown should never be used for light industrial, which is what it is. Right?
so we should take CP out of village as well. Why would you want it in the village?
We can remove that from the village as well.
Okay, so it's only gonna maybe happen rural and then Route 1A and B and industrial. I just think that there's a lot of residential properties with a lot of acreage, and to have a guy have a woodworking shop in it. To not allow that, it seems crazy.
You just proposed that. What?
Okay, I'm proposing it.
Wait.
What?
Hold on. Let's back up. Let's back up.
Yeah, we're
So,
looking at woodworking in general, right?
right. So is it, I assume it's agreed that woodworking use would be prohibited from the downtown if this is approved. But Barbara, you then said removing the CP item as well in the village.
Well, do we want woodworking in the village?
I would say no,
Same kind of issues, right?
right, I'd say no.
Okay, but I do think that woodworking should be allowed going through either planning board or CEO in residential areas.
Isn't it right now?
Nope, it's
Nope,
prohibited right
blank.
now. The
Look at
residential,
6-12.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. Rural village and residential should be allowed.
So PB for that?
Where's the rural village?
rural village is very weird. One of it is at the intersection of Friendship and Back Cove Road. One of it is the area surrounding the industrial park. And then another one is at the intersection of Old Augusta Road and Washington Road.
Huh, okay.
There were,
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Barbara that that's a reasonable use in those areas. I think a lot of, small businesses are gonna wanna, work out of their homes and things, and it's probably not objectionable to anybody.
So why isn't woodworking in rural residential and rural village all just CP? Why is it to go to the planning board?
I think that's a good idea.
well, hold on. And the other thing is, if we're talking about people out of their homes, that might just be a cottage industry.
Yeah, that's true.
But why have people look at this thing and think, oh my God, I can't do it? This should be simple to look at for a Joe Schmo. Joette Smo right here. Joelle Smo.
Like half the time, or actually a majority of the time, Mark and I just get a call anyway saying, "Hey, am I allowed to do this?"
Yeah.
Um,
All right, so we're proposing that change for those two districts or not?
so
I would like to propose that we add planning board to review woodworking in the residential zone and remove CP from the village zone as well as downtown.
and this rural village district, is woodworking allowed there or not?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I propose that we change that all of those three, rural, residential, and rural village to CP. Why should it go before the planning board? Let these guys determine whether they don't, it's rural. I mean, it's not in the village and people on their own properties, let them, if they meet the code for it, then let them do it. We don't need to weigh in on that, do we?
Yeah,
As a-
the only thing that for me, I think about is, if they get fairly big and prosperous, big truck deliveries, delivering lumber a lot, how it affects the neighbors, that's all.
Yeah, well, don't forget, we're also changing the CP so that we're all gonna get notified when those approvals happen, and if we wanna, have a hearing, we can ask for it.
Okay, so that's fine. Let's do CP across the board there. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep. CP across the board, does that mean also in the Route 1A, Route 1B and industrial?
No,
No,
Okay, I'm just making sure. I
yeah,
heard
no, I
forward and I
think
wanted to double check that.
we gotta give Mark something to do.
Fair enough.
Okay, wow, what progress. Woo-hoo, let's move
Yep.
on.
The next item for Article 6 is just including a demolition permits. Pretty straightforward, just have something on the books for demolition. That's it. And then 6-15, it just includes the accessory apartment and the short-term rental items, just because for the accessory apartment, that is something to help with LD 2003, just for a reminder that it is allowed anywhere where the single family is permitted. And then short-term, it's the point I made earlier, just so to say it is there, just not in the resource protection and stream protection zones. That's it. That's really the only change to the shoreland matrix, I think. Yeah, that's it's the matrices. There's the notes at the very end, but I didn't know if there's any other changes on the matrix before we get into the dimensional requirement items.
Your key on 617, max CP is missing.
Oh, for the oh, that's because that's just the shoreland zone one, but I can include that.
Well, yeah, I didn't see it anywhere on at least this recent printout you gave us.
I'll include that. Yeah. Well, other than that, there were just some clarifying items for pages 619 and 620. This is LD 2003 related. It's just noting that one accessory apartment doesn't have to have an additional minimum lot size unless it's in the shoreland zone. And then it's giving an example for an affordable housing development, since that would be permitted to have 2.5 times the base density of that district. And in both of them, I just give examples just for people who are curious what on earth I am talking about in those paragraphs.
I have a question about that. With this 2.5, is that a state mandated thing?
Yep. 2.5 base density is
Is-
LD
They
2003.
allow greater density for,
We can go higher if we would like, but 2.5 is the minimum we have to permit for an affordable housing project.
the minimum.
Minimum, yep.
I don't think it should be any higher than that.
And then I think 6.9.7, it was just me making a minor correction.
Okay.
All right, and that's it for Article 6. For Article 7, there were just some very minor changes that were suggested. Mark wanted to get rid of some of the dates that were under the construction standards, because I think we still have 2011 for the fire protection item. And
Yeah, instead of actually listing out the code year, just list out the code and refer to the adopted, state version. That way you never have to go back in and change it every time the state changes code years.
So wait, we're on Article 7 now, because I don't have that in my
That was just, that was a minor correction item that Mark and I were discussing, that I already sent all this stuff out, so I just didn't have it. It's just crossing out 2 years pretty much. And just saying, rather than saying the 2002 National Electrical Code on page 7-3, it'll just say the National Electrical Code.
Okay,
It's that's pretty much it. But
Okay.
But yeah, on page 7-12, that is the item that I did give out. And I know that was a topic that was raised at the last meeting that I feel we'll discuss a little bit more. And that's the elevator item that Chief Boker asked for.
Well, I'll start with that one since I'm the one raising an objection about it. I totally understand. I've had this conversation on construction projects that I've run before, that nobody's minimum size requirement for elevators makes sense anymore. And it's a problem all over. The state says you have to have room for a 76 by 24 stretcher, and the biggest car required by ADA is 80 inches by 54 inches on the interior space. And so what they're asking for here is a car that has 10 feet by 6 feet clear inside of it, which is dramatically larger than that. And like, you can fit a lot of people in a 10-foot by 6-foot elevator. And certainly more than 1,500 pounds. And so you're running into a situation where if you make the elevator that big, you can't use a normal low-rise elevator. You've got to go up to a heavier capacity elevator, creates a bunch of extra expense. So I think we should pick a size, but it should be something that is a little more reasonable to the minimum viable size that you need to get somebody out of a building here.
Yeah,
I'll just,
yeah, go ahead, Mark. I was gonna
yeah, so, talking to Derek Booker, what he did was he went down, he took his crew, went down to the Sprout Block, used their elevator because they know that elevator is basically the minimum size that they can get that stretcher in there and transport people via the elevator. And the rationale behind that is anything moving forward, they want to make sure that they can fit the stretcher in the elevator so that they can transport patients. Part of the issue too is some people think, well, just set them up. Well, that's great, but you can't always set a patient up if their blood pressure is low, or if it's a code you're doing CPR, they got to be flat. So that was where his rationale was coming from. He basically went down, calculated the area or measured the area of Sprout Block, and said that that's the minimum area that his stretcher would fit. So that's what he wanted to make. You can make it as big as you want, but that's the minimum that he was recommending.
and what is that size? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have that page.
internal size of 10 by 6.
He has a 10-foot long stretcher.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Um,
I'm not exactly sure what the size of it is, but I know that the newer stretchers are, they also have oxygen attached to them. They have handrails. They have, I can only imagine that that's where he came up with that. So I don't have any other information.
and unfortunately, he went on vacation this week, so I don't have a good chance to ask him.
The ADA standards are 6 foot by 5 feet
So
elevators.
how much cost, Brendan, do you think that adds to the building of an elevator when they have to build one that size?
Elevator technology changes. I haven't installed an elevator on a project in 10 years. I'd be lying if I told you what it costs now. But low-rise elevators are allowed to be built in a different way than a high-rise excuse me, a high-rise elevator. And there are some really good lower cost options for doing like a 2 or 3 stop elevator. But the weight rating is low. So if you've got an apartment building or something, like you can do 3 stops for, I don't know. It's been a while, but going up to a bigger type of elevator, now you got to start to have a pit. You got to bore a hole in the ground and put one of those giant hydraulic rams in there. You got to build a bigger car with a heavier duty floor, and like, it'll start to get more and more expensive. Like, I'm all for solving the problem, but let's, pick something reasonable. I wanted to pull up the drawings for the last elevator that I did for Weston Police Station. I'll see if I can find it and throw another frame of reference out there.
Wouldn't it be cheaper?
What
for
are we
them to
gonna do with this
have
item?
another- Wouldn't it be cheaper for them to have another stretcher that was and carry it around that was designed to go in elevators as opposed to, the stretchers that they use for resident? I mean, it just kind of seems onerous on the person who's building a building that they gotta put an elevator in that's so big that's only gonna probably used to be, or maybe never used with a stretcher. I mean, when there might be another solution.
So the other thing I'll just point out is that the elevator somewhat falls into the same category as the lockbox item, where Chief Booker and just as Chief Smeltzer would say, is just saying this is our recommendation to install a 10x6 elevator or something, and then it still falls on the planning board on if the 10x6 elevator is what you want or if it's going to be something different. These are recommendations being made by the emergency chiefs. Derek could come back and say, oh, it's a small place, it's only going to require an elevator just to access this one point, that a maintenance staff member probably is going to be up there once every blue moon. It probably doesn't need a 10x6 elevator, and you could just do the ADA acceptable one.
What is VOA putting in? Do you know? I mean, what would they put in at this point in time? They've
Mark,
already,
Mark, I think they put in something that was actually bigger than what Derek put in.
Yes. Yeah,
Bigger
I
than a
mean,
10 by 6?
just to, I don't know the exact dimensions of that, but the initial proposal, we haven't gotten the exact plans, but the initial proposal is that it would be big enough. Almost anything 4 floors or less is a hydraulic elevator. They don't use cable elevators for anything, that is under 4 floors or under. So, there is, no matter what you put in for an elevator, you're gonna have to have an hydraulic ram going in there. It would just depend on, depending on the weight capacity of the elevator, would depend on the pump size and the ram size. So,
everything's got to go up exponentially. If you got a room that big, moving up and down, you could have, that could be a party theme. How many people can we fit in the elevator? Everything goes up exponentially. But anyway,
So
why
most
does this
communities.
why does this come in
Sorry,
front
go
of the planning board though? Isn't this just a permitting issue for a building?
this is just because whenever we're reviewing any of these items, we have the emergency services standards, and Chief Booker just said in the future, when there is a large building that's being created that does need an elevator, it would be nice if there was a requirement that they would have to be this size. That's it.
As much as I think this is an oversized elevator, why don't we just approve this? Because the person who wants to build this building with a smaller elevator will come to us and ask for a variance.
Yeah.
And why don't we just do it like that? And then, send the variance request to the fire chief, whoever he is at the time, and sort it out then. Does that make sense?
there's
variance
very
you
little
give
other,
it
Wait. So the way it works is, and Brendan, I think you mean a waiver in that one. So yeah, someone would come before the planning board, asking to do, we'll say, a multifamily building in this case, an apartment building, and they go through all the standards. They get to this one for emergency services and say, all right, water, I'm right on the municipal water system. That solves that. Accessibility, a lockbox, I'll install one for the fire chief. The elevator, on the other hand, that's going to be this very big problem for me. It's going to have a conflict because I can only do so much here and there. I would like a waiver for that. And then the board would determine whether to accept that waiver on whatever reasons you accept.
I don't think we have the capacity to review building codes. This is a building code issue. How many, how many emergency stairs do there have to be? How wide do all the doors have to be? How, pushing open doors. This is all.
In those cases, you can ask Mark to, like, I can always ask Mark prior to just attend the meeting and he can give his opinion on that as well.
What I'm saying is, does the planning board need to deal with these opinions? This is a permit issue. It's nothing to do with planning.
What it is
I don't
think they
understand.
want
Brendan, you first.
Yeah, Barbara, this is just like setting a setback. I don't understand what the confusion is. We're proposing
Well,
something
Does the building need
that's
2 elevators?
larger,
Does the building need two elevators?
Barbara,
Yeah.
Barbara, can you let Brendan finish his point first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
My point was that what we are asking for exceeds code requirements. We're asking for something that is larger than what any elevator code requires.
Right. Barbara, did you have any further thoughts to that?
Well, we're never given building plans anyway, to review. Very seldom are we. Where's the elevator located in relation to emergency vehicles? I mean, there's so many other issues sort of associated with the safety and use of that building that we are not privy to, and doesn't seem like something we should be involved in. I mean, is this a state thing that we have to
No,
include this?
the elevator isn't something being asked for by the state. This is something being asked by the EMS chief. I mean, Brendan did point out that for ADA requirements, there is a certain size that has to be done. But this is Derek saying, can we put in our ordinance something that would help for when we have to address an emergency? It was the same type of thing with Paul when he asked about including something for a lockbox. That's not really required in any of the state codes, unless I'm mistaken, Mark, but that was something that Chief Smeltzer just asked to include, because even though that's not a requirement elsewhere, he would like that to be a requirement for new construction for at least commercial buildings. And so Derek's asking the same thing for the elevator.
But we still have the option to waive it. as
You have
said.
the option to waive it. That's the key thing with the emergency services, where it says,
Mark can weigh in on that and even the,
and that's
No,
what, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, as far as codes, codes go by minimum. All this would do would be to increase that to a certain size. But again, if you guys give them a variance, then whatever, they put in would be according to that. So,
Right.
that pretty much is it. The location of the elevator and all of that is that's spelled out in codes as far as where it can be, all that other stuff. But the size of the elevator is determined by the minimum size is determined by ADA standards. So what Derek is asking for is a larger elevator just to fit the.
So this is the only place in the town's, process that this can be noted. It can't be noted in the CEO office.
No, because Barbara, everything that we have, it's like the setbacks that we have, the anything that is greater than 5 feet, 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 5 feet what the state standard is, or ADA or anything else needs to be listed out. So rather than write a whole ordinance specifically for this elevator size, you're just putting it into the land use ordinance.
Right, well, you guys, you know my opinion. I'm fine if you want to include it and have some huge size on it.
Well, and I'll talk with Derek to see if,
Like I said, I don't have the printout, Max, so I'm finding this rather frustrating. You
Yeah,
guys are
no,
just
I'm-
not.
yeah, I think I see what happened. I have some copies with me, so it probably didn't get out with everyone, unfortunately. I'm sorry about that.
And I wonder if Derek understands the implications of what he's asking
Uh,
for.
When Derek I think Derek's back next week, so when we have a public hearing date, I will be sure to talk to Derek about that to see if this is the number he has to have, or if it can come down by even a little bit. And if not, then to see if he can attend the public hearing to then talk about it at that time too. Talk to Derek.
Okay,
So after that, the next change I have is in Article 9-14. So this was based on some previous applications we've had when talking about minimum parking requirements. Well, actually, no, this first change that's being done is just stating that if there's an applicant who's going to be heavily depending on a municipal parking area, that an agreement would be done to help address potential financial assistance on maintenance, like snow plowing. So for example, in the ordinance, we don't have a minimum parking requirement for those who are in the downtown. So the Coon parking lot, the Worcester parking lots, if we have someone who's going to build a lot more, let's say build a lot more apartments or anything above those units, and they're going to heavily depend on one of the parking lots, then they're just using up a lot of space that we'll have to depend on for plowing, making sure it's plowed immediately, and just making sure it's ready for other uses as well. So that's just the item I have on there.
so Max, this is for new businesses going forward.
New businesses going forward. I will need to stress that. So new businesses going forward, if someone wants to, because I bring up the Worcester parking lot, we just got that one. Or if someone wants to buy an unused building or repurpose a building that's in the downtown or in the village area, and they want to heavily depend on a municipal parking space, then we would just ask to provide some shared maintenance items.
Why would that be grandfathered in? I don't think that's fair.
Because
That the people who are here get to park for free, other businesses already here get to park for free and everybody else has to pay. I mean,
that would be a very, because I don't know how legal I don't know how legal that is to go to all these businesses afterwards and say you need to pay. I mean, this is just having something addressing it going forward. We can always discuss options for prior businesses as well.
I just think it's unfair to charge new businesses and have older businesses get it for free just because they're older. I mean, I don't think that's something to be grandfathered personally.
Well, there must be other venues for addressing that besides the land use ordinance, right?
I mean, that can be, that, I mean, that is something that I can look to see what can be done in, I think, the traffic ordinance or whatever we have for parking in the downtown, and see if that is an option, if the board would prefer that. And I'll look at businesses that were prior to implementation on that.
But I mean, having said that, I mean, if we're trying to promote business in the center of town, bring people to the center of town, why, and help the businesses out thrive, why are we not letting them use and paying for the municipal parking to be maintained by the town? And why are we pushing off that expense onto them?
because I think some people would look at it as, well, here's this one business X that moved in and they're using up the entirety of the Worcester parking lot before people have a chance to come to the downtown and use those spaces, or using up all the on-street parking spaces, even though they don't have to provide their own off-street parking space. That's kind of where it's at. If we are trying to promote businesses, we do want to promote people in the downtown. But if we have limited parking and we have a new business move in that without a parking plan just tells everyone to use all the municipal parking spaces, then that business is taking advantage of what should be a public use.
Right, well, right now, probably the biggest user of parking spaces downtown, even though they have their own parking area, would be the Waldorf Theater. I mean, the Waldorf Theater fills up. I mean, all of town is filled up with additional parking. And so the question is, do we want how would the Waldorf Theater feel about having to pay additional money to the town in order to provide parking?
For the sake of timing, and I can already sense from at least two, Brendan, I don't know if you've weighed in on this one, but I'm don't know what your thoughts are.
I'm very opposed to this. The municipal parking lots are all located around the Main Street, Friendship Street, Jefferson Street intersection.
Yep.
Um,
Then for the sake, then I'm sorry for cutting you off here. I think for the
go ahead.
I was gonna say this was just a suggestion. We can remove it. It sounds like no one's interested in this one, so we can just remove it for the sake of time.
Okay, let's remove it for now.
The next change is just noting the parking requirements for affordable multifamily housing. This is an LD 2003 item where 2 parking spaces must be provided for every 3 affordable dwelling units. That's a state item. I can't change it. That's it. And then the last change we have for parking, this is just one of the notes that are on there. This is based on some previous applications with the minimum required parking, where questions were asked why, and if it could be reduced. This would just grant whoever's the reviewing authority to waive the minimum required, as long as a justifiable alternative number can be provided. It's kind of based on what we did with 80 Gray, where it was supposed to be 36, but what the planning board did was waive the minimum requirement, but still note in the conditions of approval that so many spaces had to be provided for so many units. And this is so that the minimum required is more of a suggestion and can be adjusted. Because I think the other reason was because there was all this parking that had to be done for the Family Dollar, for example, and it's almost empty most of the time, but that's what was required for minimum parking. And even the businesses that are along Route 1 who are reoccupying some spaces are saying, do I really need to provide 30 parking spaces for a drive-through? And I looked at this and said, technically, yes.
Or a laundromat or whatever.
Or a
Yep.
laundromat or whatever. Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Okay. And obviously I think I said the public works director has to be involved and yeah, help review this as well. All right. And then we get to Article 10.
So Max,
Yep.
the reviewing authority is us,
It
or is
depends.
it the CEO, or is it everybody?
It would depend on the use. I mean, if we're talking a brand new apartment building, then yes, it would be the planning board. If this was, I don't know, woodworking out in the rural district, it would be Mark and I.
Okay, but
the
it's
same
not
unit
like,
in the
it's
matrix.
not like the roads department or something like that. It's
No, it's whoever's reviewing the site plan.
okay. Yep.
Okay. And then we get to Article 10. I'll try and go through these a little fast. Page 10-1 is all LD 2003. I know it's adding a lot to accessory apartments, but this is just saying that if you're gonna build an accessory apartment, you have access to clean water, you have access to enough septic system to handle it. And because an accessory apartment can now be a detached item from the main building, it still has to meet the setback requirements. It can't make the lot more non-conforming if applicable. And a parking space does not have to be provided for the accessory apartment. But they still have to have unhindered access to at least one of the two minimum parking spaces for a single family dwelling unit.
I'm all for all of the adjustments that we're gonna skip by them.
Yeah, I know.
That's okay.
We're getting to the
No, they're good, they're fine.
Barbara, Brendan, thoughts on the accessory apartment? Brendan, you're muted.
If it's all LD 2003, it doesn't really matter what we think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can adjust some words, but as long as the intent is still, we just have to make sure the intent is still there. Yeah. Barbara, accessory apartments?
I think we're good.
Okay. Next change would be skipping to 10-21. This is where we start getting into multifamily items. And again, it's more of just adjusting the language to be more in sync with LD 2003, like public supply and mandatory connection. It's just noting that if it's a multifamily dwelling unit, it's connected to a central septic system.
Oh, wait a second, did we skip past 10.18?
No, we're on 10.18, but this is where first changes actually happen.
I got a question about this one.
Yep.
So the change here is adding the words if the property boundary is within 500 feet of the system.
Yep.
So if I buy a 10-acre lot and the corner of it is within 500 feet of the system, who is going to pay to extend the town water system from where it ends to somewhere out of my 10-acre lot to where my building's going to go?
That usually falls on the applicant / developer. And I'll note that that change was not an LD 2003 change. That was something that I was suggested by someone.
And the idea here is that we're providing a requirement that's going to grow the town water system over time.
Well, this would just be the utility district, so the sewer system.
The sewer system, sorry.
No, it's yeah. But
Right.
yeah, still the same point. And this is specifically under the multifamily one. So this is if someone wants to build a 3+ unit building, and you're right, if they're within 500 feet of the system, they're just being told to extend that sewer line just to their property to be connected to it.
The town is gonna pay for that.
No, that would be the developer.
The extension. Oh, no. Oh, the developer has to pay for the extension as well as Brendan pointed out, whatever was necessary across the property to get to the building.
Yep, developers responsible. It's kind of like what's happening right now with the 80 Gray project and any upgrades for the water or sewer or anything that Volunteers of America has to pay for it.
I mean, in the situation that I just described, I would personally rather see that not being run into some gigantic septic field that's bound to fail over time, but actually have it connected into the sewer.
Mhm.
I think this is a good idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
So all multi-unit residential buildings, is that what this is referring to? Not
Ye-
all residential buildings.
No, just a building that has 3 or more units within it.
The 3 or more units. Okay, great.
Yeah, 10.18 is multifamily dwellings.
Yep. Sorry, I don't have the page prior to this one, but there were no
Yes.
changes to it, so I don't have anything for it.
Okay,
And then after that, there is just this note for a private system so that if they are unable to do it, they are unable to connect to the sewer system, then they can still make their own private system as defined in this ordinance, but it still must pass by the local plumbing inspector and satisfy state requirements. And that is an LD 2003 item. Just minor word changes. And then 10.18.7, that it adds in a subcategory for this, and this is going over all LD 2003 related requirements for a multi-unit family structure that wants to be an affordable housing development. So if Volunteers of America was to try to apply, so if Volunteers of America tried to apply like a year after this, these are the items they would have to address.
Right.
And this is just noting that they'd have to put a covenant in the Lincoln County Registry of Deeds saying that the units will be affordable for at least 30 years. And that affordability would be based on the Lincoln County local area median income, that they can satisfy the base density, they can satisfy the parking requirements, and that it's going to be located in a growth area, which for the town of Waldeboro is Route 1 or the village area. And yeah.
Is the limitation, is that a state mandated limitation, or is that something we put in?
Which limitation?
The 80% of median income?
All of this is state language. Well, yeah, the 80%, 120%, that's state language.
And we can't change that?
That's
Because I think it's very, I think it should be 90% actually. Because the difference between the two is, you know, for someone who's earning what do you call it?
I will,
A basic salary. I mean, they can't, I mean, it's too high.
I will have
The
to,
cost is too
I'll have
high.
to double check with the state because they said that towns can be more lenient. I don't know if we are, because that's their definition. So I'll check with them tomorrow. on
That
that.
would change that to 90%,
90%, and that-
reducing it to someone who, or bringing it up so that someone could make as little as $29,000 and apply, because otherwise they had to be making below 24.
And that would just be for the rent, no change to the
No,
Occupancy,
I changed that one to 150,
150.
so that more people who are really truly, you know, I mean, I mean, $29,000 isn't very much income.
Right.
24 is really low.
Okay. Brendan, Barbara, thoughts on that? So,
I don't have an opinion.
okay.
Yeah, neither do I.
I'm assuming these.
I think if I learned more about it, I would definitely have an opinion, but
Yeah.
I don't
There
really.
must be other funding groups, right, that kind of come to play,
I
this
mean,
kind of housing?
No.
Median income in Lincoln County is $32,000 according to the states, and that's pretty low as it is. And what we're saying is that they have to make anything below 80% of that. Well, below 80% of $32,000 is $24,000. So that means you have to make below $24,000 to get into that affordable housing. But that's really, I mean, so, and I'm saying it should, someone who with more income than that should still get into it, because 24,000 is really low. I mean, who can live on $24,000? Nobody really. So who can live on $30,000? Very few people. So I'm just making it so that someone who's makes more money is not shut out from that simply because they don't make $24,000 a year or less.
and go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, we're probably creating a problem if we deviate from these numbers, because these are commonly held definitions of what affordable housing is.
Right.
And like we were talking about with VOA, they couldn't tell us what they wanted to do as far as the exact level of affordability, because it all had to go back to their funding sources. And so if we have I don't know that you're well, I mean, affordable housing is going to have a long wait list no matter what happens. If you raise the income of people in there, that means they're gonna get charged more money. Like, does that help?
Well-
Does it help if those rents go up for the people who make dramatically less than 90% of the area median income? You know,
No, it just means anyone who is making more can still apply for it. It doesn't put a bottom line. It can be anyone, but anyone below 29,000, what I'm saying, anyone below $29,000 can apply for it as opposed to anyone below 24. I mean, the thing is that Lincoln County is a very wealthy, relatively wealthy county. We are the poorest township in Lincoln County, I believe, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, that's right.
so when you take a median income from Lincoln County, it doesn't really apply to Waldoboro. Waldoboro has poorer people than the rest of Lincoln County. So if you're basing it on Lincoln County, which has higher income than we do, that's going to shut out people within our own community
So
who should have access to it.
So very similar to the elevator item. I'm actually talking with the people from DECD who dealt with this language, so I will talk to them tomorrow to see if these numbers can even be changed. Because I think Brendan's gonna be right on this one, that 80, 120, those are the numbers that I see.
Well, I thought
every-
you said they would more link. I asked the question, do we have?
Right. But that's why I will check with them, because they
Okay.
say we can be more lenient on this, but I don't know how they'll feel about the definition change, especially for affordable housing items like this. So I will check with them, because I don't know where it'll be on that point. Anything else on the affordable housing development item? I know we're getting to the second hour here.
We also don't want to discourage that kind of development by having it be totally unique to the rest of the state. You know,
That
Well-
would actually bring more of it in, not less.
Well, I'll check with the DECD tomorrow and get their opinions on this. And if they say we can go up, then we can talk about that at the public hearing date as well. The next change I have is 10-30 and 10-31. This was the shipping container item. This was brought up from some questions this past year about people with shipping containers throughout the town. And we have in here that they have to apply for a shipping container building permit, which doesn't exist. So and a lot of these standard items that people are asking for, or that we were asking for, are a bit outdated at this point and require Mark to be keeping track quite a bit of few things. So what we're suggesting, well, what's being suggested is to remove all that and just say that with a building permit, someone can put in a shipping container in the usual places, and we're including rural because that's where a lot of people are asking to put them. And we are including an item that says that if anyone's gonna put in a shipping container, that they include a visual screening and buffering so that it can be avoided, be seen by the neighbors.
Good.
That's pretty much it. I wish John was here. I think he was someone who was very interested in seeing this one unfold, but I'll have to ask him his opinion on this another time. But Brendan, Barbara, thoughts on shipping containers?
so this is all in relation to storage.
Right. If someone wants to buy a shipping container, put it on their property and just have it for general storage of things, then they'd be allowed to do so in the Route 1 areas, the rural area, and the industrial area.
Okay. And then there's okay, it's
And then-
10.23 for using it for other uses. Okay.
Yeah. And if it's going to be in a different district than those, then it would be a temporary permit. Mark?
Yeah, the only thing that I would ask the board is to consider putting in some type of definition as far as quantity. Because you know, if you leave it wide open, is 6 okay? Is 7? What if you stack them? What, you know, I would just like to have some guidance so that when I get complaints from neighbors, I've got something that says, you know, oh, they're allowed. Like right now, the state, when it comes to, you know, broken down vehicles, you're allowed 2. So I know where my guidance is. But I would just ask if the board is gonna change that to just give me some guidance on numbers.
It's
So-
700 feet.
Yeah, Mark, I was about to say, that's already a standard in here. The total floor area of all shipping containers on a lot shall not exceed 700 square feet. Does that work for you? You're muted. Mark, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, if the board's good with just the 700 square feet, we can do that. So, if they wanted to, change that, but yeah, we can definitely do it by size if that's what you'd like to do.
It's probably 2.5 40-footers. So,
Just over 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
but they're permitted in the commercial districts?
Yes. There,
Any number is permitted?
No, 700.
700 square feet is the total amount.
Okay, so Moose Crossing has 4 now, I mean, for instance. It seems like in the commercial districts, we should allow more.
We can increase that since this is talking about ones that are permanently done. This is kind of what Mark was asking for. Whatever the number is, it's fine as long as there is a number determined. Do we just want to double it to 1,400 so that would count a Moose Crossing?
And they're still considered temporary, 1,400 temporary storage of goods.
It would be,
Because they're not putting in a foundation or whatever.
this is saying that the shipping containers can permanently be there.
Their use is limited to the temporary storage of goods. Okay.
But someone can get a permit to temporarily place them on there for 6 months if they need more.
I say leave it as it is and let them come back if they want more, because I think it's opening a can of worms if you let them have more.
Okay, let's leave it at 700 and see how it goes.
Huh. Well, this will, I think we'll actually be reaching the end of the tunnel soon, since there's only 2 real big ones I needed to go over.
Good.
10-48, it's including some specific standards for massage therapy office. These are just some items that the state has, and we just want to have it on the books for us. That's pretty much it. Just saying that a copy of the state issued license is easily visible in a public area as well as in the application. Kind of similar for other uses we have in town. And then I don't really think I need to go through all the definitions just because most of these are LD 2003. The only point I will quickly raise is for the accessory apartment. That's just making a quick adjustment, but also setting in a maximum size limit of 950 square feet. Just because although we didn't have that originally, the concern that other towns have raised has been, since someone can make a detached accessory apartment, someone could make a McMansion on the property and claim that as the accessory apartment. Whereas the state has said you can set a maximum size limit if you would like. 950 is enough for a mobile home. And I think the town of Bremen is doing a very similar number. Same thing with Warren. So I'm trying to have something that's a bit consistent with the area.
So, why is accessory dwelling unit and accessory apartment the same thing now? Is this a LD 2003 change?
Yeah, LD 2003 keeps saying accessory dwelling unit throughout their language. But when I've asked, well, we've always had accessory apartment and this is what we have throughout the ordinance, they said, well, it's the same thing. So I just have accessory apartment / accessory dwelling unit so that if I have someone who comes in is only familiar with the state language saying accessory dwelling unit, I can go to the definition and know that anytime accessory apartment is mentioned, it actually means accessory dwelling unit.
So if I build a detached accessory dwelling unit, has its own water, own sewer, it's called an accessory apartment?
Yep. That's what the town has always had. It's just saying it's the same thing at this point.
Why don't we just make the two things conforming? Why don't we just conform it to the state standard?
Be-
Just use dwelling, get rid of apartment.
If people want to remove accessory apartment throughout it and just replace it with accessory dwelling unit, I can do that. This,
It makes sense that they should be,
I mean, this change is just saying that if someone's using the state term, then they just need to look for accessory apartment throughout the ordinance. Yeah, either way works.
Right.
Some towns just decide to have that same thing as well, so that they're not confusing people who are used to accessory apartments. But
I'm sort of hoping that people are going to start using this. And I think that making it clear and easy to understand is a good place to start. And, you know, having the code refer to a detached building as an apartment is confusing. I think it makes more sense to just replace accessory apartment with accessory dwelling unit. I mean, the definition wouldn't change, like your definition captures both.
yeah, I think should,
Whether it's inside of an existing building or it's a standalone building.
so perhaps, so I'll take out accessory apartment as the name of the title of the definition, and it'll be the accessory dwelling unit. Should I include a sentence at the bottom that says, well, or just say that it's also commonly known as an accessory apartment in the definition?
sure, if you want to.
That,
You
that,
you actually have it in there in the second sentence.
yeah, I see the
it's-
accessory apartment has a separate kitchen and everything. But I'm saying,
Wait, oh, so they are different?
No,
no, accessory dwelling unit and accessory apartment are the exact same thing. And the only change I'm saying, and the only change that's happening here is sort of acknowledging it's the same thing. Like,
Okay,
yeah,
if
that-
we, sorry to cut you off. If we
No
can't
worries.
understand it, no one else is gonna understand it either. How about we just do a find replace and just replace accessory apartment everywhere in the code with
Right.
accessory dwelling unit?
Okay, and that's what I was asking, so.
Okay, awesome.
By doing that, Brandon, yeah, you're fixing a problem because the code book refers to those buildings as accessory dwellings. They do not refer to them as apartments. That's a use. So
I had a note here on this one, and I thought that we had an 800 square foot limit on these in the past. Am
Yeah.
I making that up?
No, it was originally 800 square feet. I just have it at 950 because, as I mentioned a bit earlier, I've been working with a few other towns, including Bremen and Warren. They're about 950 or 1,000 square feet, so I'm just upping it to that just to be a bit more consistent with the route to the neighboring towns as well. That way, if someone's in Bremen, they want to move up to Waldoboro, they're still used to that square footage item. That's pretty much it. But I can go back to 800 if people would prefer that one.
I don't really have an opinion about it. I was just surprised that I
Square feet
looked
of
in there,
magic
there
number,
wasn't a
something?
size.
I mean,
No,
950 is a strange number.
no,
I mean, 1,000,
no, the maximum size limit when it comes to the accessory apartments, the state just said you can set a maximum size limit. Okay, do you have a recommendation? No. And so many towns and cities are very different on this one. Some are just saying a flat number of like 500 feet. Some people are saying 2,000 square feet. Some people are going based on percentages. It's all over the place. But a lot of towns are just saying a mobile home 750. We'll start there. And then the discussion is how big do you want to make it? I mean, 1,000 feet's fine.
I'd make it 1,000 feet. I mean, if you're trying to squeeze kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms into something that is basically a wing, it might still be 1,000 feet.
Brendan, Barbara, thoughts on maximum size?
I have no objection to that. I don't really care.
1,000 square feet. All right, then all these other definitions that you see in here are LD 2003 related, except massage therapist office. That's another state definition in there. Reviewing authority, that specifically says term to refer to the planning board and or the code enforcement officer. There was a request to put in stream protection district in the definition, so I included that. I do have a definition for short-term rental. And that's just based on other similar communities that have the language that's on page 15-28. And I made a quick adjustment to subdivisions,
Yeah.
just to note that first of all, the accessory apartment or dwelling unit would be exempt unless it's physically detached from the building. But I'm also noting that a lot of 40 acres or more would be exempt from subdivision count, as long as it doesn't contain a shoreline zone, and also just to refer people to the state for any subdivision exemptions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I read that, I was confused, maybe because I don't have the, I mean, so what does that mean? So a lot of 40 acres more is exempt from the determination of a subdivision. What does that mean?
That would mean that if I have a 50-acre lot in the rural district and I portion off 45 acres for lot 1, and then I'd have my remaining 5 acres and split that in 2, I wouldn't have to go to a subdivision review yet, because that 45-acre lot would be exempt from that subdivision count. And so that was because the state has that as an option for towns to include, because some people want to just portion off a huge chunk of land, either for farming, conservation, or forestry purposes. I was just thinking of including that 40-acre item because of the that 2-lot subdivision we had very recently, where the question was asked, why are we looking at a 2-lot subdivision? If we had the 40-lot exemption, we wouldn't have had to go through the subdivision process at all. But the 40-acre lot is an optional item that towns can implement. This was something I thought we implemented when we redid this ordinance in 2020, but I realized we didn't actually. So
if somebody has a 50-acre lot, they can separate out, they can separate out 5 acres.
Yep.
And they can then subdivide those 5 acres in 2. And that means that they don't have to apply for a subdivision for the entire lot of the rest of the 40. I'm sorry,
I'll have 60 acres in this
Right.
scenario. I'll have 60 acres, and I want to portion off 40 acres to go to person A, and then I'm keeping the last 20 acres.
Right.
And then I take that 20 acres and I split that in 2. Normally that would be a subdivision process, kind of like the 2-lot subdivision we reviewed, where we have to go through those 2 lots that I just created, but we had to count that 3rd lot, even though it was already sold off after I did all that. What this exemption would say is the same splits happen, but that 40 acres doesn't count at all. So we don't have to do a subdivision review for those 2 lots that I've just split.
And then is that 40 acres then under the 5-year rule, or is it? I don't understand.
40 acres would then be under the 5-year rule, because would then fall under the subdivision item if it's split again.
Right.
The whole
Okay.
point is to keep the lot 40 acres.
Right.
And I can specify that the lot has to be 40 acres or more. If not split under the 5-year period, kind of like what every other exemption
Right.
does have.
Okay.
And this is 40 acres that doesn't contain any part of, that does not have any shoreland zone.
Right.
So
Right. I got
if
that.
they have a stream that runs right through it, even if it's the tiniest corner on it, it wouldn't get that exemption.
Okay.
But that's an optional state exemption that I'm just suggesting so that if someone does a very similar thing, we don't have to review a 2-lot subdivision. Okay.
That makes sense to me, I guess. I'm trying to come up with a way that it's objectionable. I don't really see the problem. Why not do it? Max, sorry, Barb.
Barbara?
Yeah, Max, I just want to point out 15-4 base density, that paragraph needs a little work. You cut I think you've got an extra not include in there. It doesn't, the sentence doesn't read well. This does not include local density, not include local density bonuses. And not sure what you want to say there.
Okay. I'll double check the state language.
I've got one of those two, Max, on 15.9.
Okay.
You've got a district listed in the designated growth area that is downtown village. I don't think we have a downtown village. I think you meant downtown business there.
Okay, and this was the growth area.
Unless there's supposed to be a comma maybe between downtown and village.
Yep, that's supposed to be a comma. Thank you for catching that.
Okay, all right, thanks. Did we do it? Did we make it to the end?
Unless anyone has any other changes.
We did have, I just one thought, did Johnny give you any notes about what he wanted to have included in this ordinance? He brought it up at the last meeting. I mean, how you all feel.
No, I didn't hear anything.
Okay, well,
The only other changes Mark gave me were from don't know what that was. Only other changes were stuff that Mark gave me, and that's for the non-conforming area. It's just some corrections noting that in the floodplain. This was stuff that I was just given. And it's hidden that 2 hour mark. Mark, do you want to just quickly go over your suggestions?
Just
for-
briefly, what it is it the state or the federal government has changed the floodplain. So if you build within the floodplain, it used to be you had to raise the structure by 2 feet. Now the state requires 3 feet. I mean, the federal government requires 3 feet for flood zones. So we just needed to update that one number. That's it.
That's yeah.
good.
All right.
Okay.
And
Well,
one other
the
question.
only other-
Mac?
Oh, wait, Barbara, you first.
Yeah, sorry, one other question, since I couldn't hear you when you were talking about where, I'd like you to tell me now, if you please, where I find the definitions for small agriculture and large agriculture.
That would be page 10-2. It'll
Is there
say,
any reason why we can't have a subset in the definitions?
I can include in agriculture related activities definition that the determination between small and large is based on vehicle traffic, because that's how it's defined in page 10-2.
And batch 2,
So I'll include a sentence on that.
okay.
Mark, you were saying?
Yeah, I do have 2 items that I would like the board to consider as far as changes as well. And they affect the lighting ordinance and the noise ordinance. The problem that we get into is both of them refer to using meters in order to measure light and then measure noise. It is very ambiguous. The light meter standards, the meters change drastically depending on what type of light it is. It's not like you can just take one light meter and then do every single light. You have to, if you're doing it correctly, you would have to, for incandescent, you would have to use a meter that measures properly incandescent lights. And it's just to the point where, do we really want to get into measuring light and noise, purchasing meters and holding to that standard? So I would just put it to the board if we would be okay to remove any reference to meters.
Well, what do we do about the noise ordinance and
Yeah.
multiple use, event centers and whatnot?
Yeah, a lot of times that usually becomes a police matter as far as noise complaints and stuff. The issue that we get into is the minute you start getting into meters and stuff like that, who's calibrating it? When was the last time it was calibrated? Can somebody challenge that? Well, you're using an inferior meter. Talking to the town manager, we kind of both agree that we probably should not be in the business of measuring those two, those two codes.
Well, I have to tell you that, our neighborhood suffers from, people shooting tannerite to the point where it's shaking neighbors' windows. And, I think that's the only recourse we have to complain.
I don't know if it's, from a police standpoint, if that's something in their avenue. But I don't know how the standards with noise ordinance, and we got into this, in other projects is, somebody complained about the cabinet shop. So I did, noise. I went into the bar and I got 10 decibels higher inside the bar next door than I did on the sidewalk with him running his saw. So I don't know if we're really, using it correctly, and rather or not we should even be doing that.
If-
Well, yep.
So how are you gonna manage the performance standard? Well, like, are you proposing changing the standard and just eliminating a decibel level that's allowed to leave the property line?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've already done, if you take a look at the lighting ordinance that we have, it basically says any dazzling or significantly bright light is not allowed to leave the property and become a nuisance. It doesn't include things like a normal attached light by your door and stuff like that. But if you've got a spotlight, that light is not supposed to, leave your premises. So we have that to fall back on as far as complaints and dealing with that. Noise, that is a very subjective aspect. So noise complaints are usually dealt with through the police department. So I mean, no, we can have the language in there, but I don't know how we would properly measure that. I don't even know who. We've got an old Radio Shack noise meter. I have no idea if it's accurate. I have no idea where we could possibly get it calibrated. It just brings up a lot of questions, and what if somebody challenges the meter? It would be like a police officer with a radar gun. They've got to have it calibrated every so often. It has to meet certain guidelines. We have nothing. And I really don't know of any other community that is running light meters or noise meters. They don't have that in their standards. So
So you don't know
I mean,
what,
it's up to you.
Hold on. Barbara, you first.
so Mark, you don't know what the police do about noise right now? They just go
No,
if somebody's making a lot of noise?
absolutely. If somebody is, they do have the nuisance language in there. There's a separate thing for nuisances if somebody's continually having loud parties and stuff like that. So they can use that. But usually if there's some loud noises that are going on, the usual complaint path is for PD. Like I said, the only one I've ever had is from the noise standpoint is just the cabinet shop.
So one thing about having it in the ordinance is that when people do want to have outdoor events or, centers, this does give people a heads up about the noise, and it might totally play into how, where they set up the bands, where they, how they orient the layout, do their design work on their property. So I think we have more research to do, and we're not ready to deal with this for June's.
Sure, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
fine.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think if you get rid of the metric, it becomes subjective. And so what's dazzling to one person may be dull to another. What's loud to one person may be, within reason. So
Yeah,
I think we gotta keep the metric and just
Yeah,
maybe
I see
better
that.
equipment or figure it out, but.
I agree with Eric.
We'll get you some better equipment, Mark. Start with good batteries.
All right. Well, with all that, we
We
do
don't-
have one item we do need to address, and that is setting a public hearing date.
14 days from now.
I thought we already did that.
No,
we're waiting.
that was something where we said we were gonna set it today, just
Oh.
in case something changes over the week. So for at least 13 days from now, we are looking at least April 2nd, I believe. And then April 4th would be the next Thursday, so anytime between April 2nd to April 9th would be all right, because April 9th will be the select board meeting date.
Which-
I just need to know a time so that I can post that, and
And
Have
we
it-
could have it the hour before the select board meeting, right?
you can. I don't know
E-
how
either
well that
Tues-
would go over.
No, that's not a good idea.
Either Tuesday or Thursday is fine with me.
Um, I say as early as possible.
Early as
would-
possible.
I would think, but isn't the room availability an issue?
Throughout March it is because of the budget season, but I would say at least by April 4th, we should be able to have the conference room.
What day of the week is that?
That would be Thursday. And then I would just be make any changes that are requested at the public hearing, I'd change it before the select board meeting.
Right.
And I'd invite the members of the select board to this meeting so that they can make the changes here rather than at last second.
Does anybody object to the fourth, was it fourth?
Yeah, the 4th.
I'm fine with that.
Brendan, Barbara, you're fine with that? The 4th.
Yep. At 6 o'clock or what? What
I-
time?
I assume 6 o'clock, since it would give everyone a chance who's working in the middle of the day to come out in case they do have any objections or thoughts they want to share.
Okay,
And hopefully if it's like the other public hearings I've been facing, we'll get 2 or 3 people who just want to get some clarity, and then that should be it. And hopefully we don't get one of the people who hear LD 2003 and think a lot of negative stuff and assumptions. That's my hope.
Hey,
All right.
Mark, a quick question for you.
Wait. Brendan, sorry, one quick thing. If we're all set with the ordinance, or we all set, then I can stop the recording.
Totally, yes.
All right.